Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. My grandmother's antique vase had been in our family for generations. It was a beautiful piece of art that held a great deal of sentimental value to me. After my grandmother passed away, I inherited the vase and kept it on display in my living room, where it always caught the eye of visitors. I cherished it and made sure to take great care of it. One day, while I was at work, my neighbor called me to inform me that there was a man lurking around my house. I immediately rushed home, but by the time I got there, the man was gone. Nothing seemed to be missing, so I shrugged it off as a potential robbery attempt and didn't think much of it. A few weeks later, I noticed that my grandmother's vase was missing. My heart sank. This vase was priceless to me, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing it forever. I searched every inch of my house, but it was nowhere to be found. I even checked with my family members to see if anyone had borrowed it, but they all denied taking it. I called the police and reported the theft, but they told me that without any evidence or leads, there was not much they could do. I was devastated and felt violated. I posted about the stolen vase on social media and reached out to antique dealers and pawn shops in the area, hoping to find any leads on its whereabouts. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. I had given up hope of ever finding my precious heirloom. That is until one day, I received a package in the mail. Inside was a note that read, "I'm sorry for taking your vase. It was a mistake. Please forgive me." Along with the note was the vase, unharmed and returned to its rightful place. I was overjoyed, but I still couldn't help but wonder who had taken it and why. I decided to do some digging and found out that my neighbor's son had been struggling with a drug addiction and had stolen the vase to sell it for some quick cash. He had since gone to rehab and was on the road to recovery. I was relieved that the vase had been returned, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of betrayal. My neighbor had known about her son's addiction and had not informed me. I couldn't trust her anymore. I decided to confront her about it and have an honest conversation about the situation. During our conversation, she revealed that her son had not only taken the vase, but had also been responsible for several other break-ins in the neighborhood. She had been covering for him, hoping to protect him from getting into even more trouble. I was shocked and appalled by this revelation. I urged her to encourage her son to turn himself in and seek help for his addiction. Weeks passed by without any news, but then I received a call from the police. They had caught the thief who had broken into my house and stole my vase. It turned out to be a professional thief who had been operating in the area for a long time. They had finally caught him, and he had given up the locations of all the stolen items he had taken. The police informed me that they had recovered not only my vase, but also several other items that had been stolen from my neighbors. It was a huge relief for all of us, and we were grateful for the police's efforts in catching the thief. As for my neighbor's son, he eventually turned himself in and sought help for his addiction. He went through a difficult but successful rehab program and managed to turn his life around. He even reached out to me to apologize personally for what he had done and to thank me for being a catalyst in his recovery. The incident brought us closer together, and we formed a bond based on mutual respect and understanding. I learned to forgive and be more empathetic, and my neighbor learned to trust and communicate more openly with me. Months went by, and life returned to normal. My grandmother's vase continued to hold a special place in my home, and I made sure to take extra precautions to protect it. I installed a security system, reinforced the doors and windows, and even got a guard dog. Then, one day, I received another unexpected package in the mail. This time, it was a letter from an unknown sender. The letter read, "I am sorry for stealing your vase. I was in a dark place in my life, and I made a terrible mistake. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I wanted to make things right. Enclosed, you'll find the amount of money I received for selling it. I hope this helps to make amends." I was shocked by the letter. I had never expected to hear from the thief again, let alone receive the money back. I was torn between accepting the money and donating it to charity or returning it to the thief with a note of forgiveness. After much contemplation, I decided to write back to the thief, thanking them for their gesture and letting them know that I forgave them. I also enclosed a note, telling them to keep the money and use it to start fresh and make positive changes in their life. A few weeks later, I received a final note from the thief, expressing their gratitude for my forgiveness and promising to make amends by volunteering at a local rehab center. It was a touching and unexpected ending to a story that had started with heartbreak and betrayal. The incident had taught me the value of forgiveness and understanding, and how even the darkest moments in life could lead to positive changes and growth. I learned that people make mistakes, and it's important to give them a chance to make amends and turn their life around. As for the vase, it remained a constant reminder to me of the power of forgiveness and the importance of protecting the things we hold most dear. It was a symbol of my grandmother's love and legacy, and I was grateful for the journey it had taken me on. The next one is an entitled People Story. I had lived in a beautiful house in a HOA neighborhood with my husband Frank and our daughter Georgia for almost 10 years. Our daughter was disabled, and we had modified our home to make it more accessible for her. We had a wheelchair ramp and a large handicap-accessible van parked in our driveway, which we needed for our daughter's daily life. For years, we had no issues with the HOA rules. We kept our property in good condition, and we respected our neighbors. However, in the last 6 months or so, there had been some changes to policies in the neighborhood's HOA. They had decided that they did not want any of the residents to park their vehicles in their driveways. When we first learned of this change, we were surprised and we thought it was ridiculous. Why couldn't we park our van in our driveway? We had a 2-car garage like the rest of the neighborhood, but with my husband's truck and the way that we had to get in and out of the van, it was impossible to keep it in the garage and get the lift gate down without hitting the other vehicle. On top of that, we also had a wheelchair ramp in the garage that took up too much room, so we had always kept it in the driveway. We were not the only family being affected by this new policy. Dozens of other homes in our neighborhood also parked their vehicles in their driveways. We thought the new policy was unfair and discriminatory, but we decided to follow it, hoping it would soon change. At first, we received letters warning us about the new policy, but we thought it was just a formality. We did not take it seriously because we thought the HOA would see how the new policy was affecting residents and would eventually change it. We continued parking our van in our driveway, just like many other residents in the neighborhood. However, we soon started receiving daily letters from the HOA, threatening to fine us for parking in our driveway. We were shocked and outraged that they would be so strict about such a trivial issue. Then one day, we received a letter stating that our van in particular was an eyesore and devalued the neighborhood, especially because we lived near the front. We were hurt and frustrated. Other homeowners were still leaving their vehicles out, so why were they focusing on our van specifically? Because it was big and ugly, according to them. We did not know what to do. We could not remove the wheelchair ramp without making it difficult for our daughter to move around, but we also could not afford the daily fines. We decided to reach out to friends and neighbors for advice. They suggested that we attend the next HOA board meeting and explain our situation to them. Maybe they would see some sense and have kindness towards us. We went to the meeting, but we were ignored and treated with disrespect. We were shocked by how the board members acted. They ignored us and acted like we did not matter. We felt like we were being discriminated against because of our daughter's disability. We were angry and frustrated, and we decided to take action. We hired a disability lawyer, researched the Fair Housing Act and other laws against discrimination for physical disabilities, and tried to gather signatures from our neighbors to dispute the change in parking rules. The HOA board did not respond to our requests, and they continued to threaten us with fines. One day, we woke up to find that our van was gone. It had been towed, and there was a note on our front door stating that we had to pay a fine to get it back. We and my husband and I decided to take the matter into our own hands and filed a complaint against the HOA with the state's Attorney General's office. We also reached out to local news outlets to bring attention to the situation and shed light on the discrimination against individuals with disabilities. Within a few weeks, the Attorney General's office opened an investigation into the HOA's discriminatory policies and practices. The news outlets also picked up the story, and it gained national attention. Soon, we were receiving support from individuals and organizations all over the country who were outraged by what had happened to us. The pressure on the HOA and its board members continued to mount, and they were forced to take action. In a public statement, the board members apologized for their discriminatory actions and announced that they would be revising their policies to ensure that individuals with disabilities were not unfairly targeted or discriminated against. They also promised to work with us to ensure that our family's needs were met and that we could park our van in our own driveway without fear of reprisal. Although we were grateful for the apology and the change in policy, we knew that there was still work to be done. We continued to work with the Attorney General's office to ensure that the HOA followed through on its promises and that individuals with disabilities were treated fairly and with respect. A few months later, we received a surprising letter from the HOA. They had decided to offer us a seat on the board of directors in recognition of our advocacy and commitment to improving the lives of individuals with disabilities. We were both shocked and honored and accepted the offer. As board members, we worked hard to ensure that the HOA followed through on its promises, and that individuals with disabilities were treated fairly and with respect. We also worked to implement new policies and practices that would make our neighborhood more accessible and welcoming to individuals with disabilities. 1 year later, we received another letter from the HOA. This time, it was an invitation to a ceremony where they planned to unveil a new memorial to individuals with disabilities. The memorial was a beautiful sculpture that depicted a wheelchair and a ramp, and it was inscribed with a quote from the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ceremony was attended by members of the community, including representatives from local disability rights organizations. It was a beautiful and emotional event, and it felt like a turning point for our neighborhood. From that day forward, our neighborhood became a more inclusive and welcoming place for individuals with disabilities. Looking back on our experience, we knew that it was a difficult and painful time for our family, but it was also a time of growth and change. We had the opportunity to advocate for ourselves and others, and we were able to make a real difference in our community. We were grateful for the support we received from so many people and organizations, and we were proud of what we had accomplished together. The next one is a petty revenge story. I used to work at a high-end fashion boutique which catered to a very specific clientele. The dress code was strict, and every employee was expected to look their best. It was a job I enjoyed, and I took pride in my appearance. However, there was an issue that began to arise at the store. Customers would occasionally find loose hairs on their clothing and complain to management. And every time this happened, my boss would immediately turn to me and accuse me of being the culprit, despite the fact that my hair was always secured in a tight bun. I found myself growing increasingly frustrated and insulted at being the constant scapegoat. And to make matters worse, I was the only blonde employee, making me an easy target for customers looking to place blame. After several months of this, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I knew that there was no way I was responsible for every hair found on a customer's clothing. I decided to dye my hair a bright pink color, which was a bold move, but it would prove that the hairs found on clothing couldn't be mine. On the day of the dye job, I was feeling both excited and nervous. I'd never made such a dramatic change to my appearance before, and I knew it would be noticed. But I was also feeling empowered. I knew I was doing the right thing and standing up for myself. Over the next few days, my new hair color was the talk of the store. Customers commented on it, and my colleagues told me they loved it. But the real test came when a customer found a hair on her clothing once again. This time, however, things were different. My boss immediately turned to me with accusatory eyes, but I calmly reminded him that my hair was now pink, and the hair couldn't have been mine. He stared at me in disbelief. But after a brief investigation, it was determined that the hair belonged to a customer who had previously tried on the clothing. My boss apologized to me for his behavior and promised to investigate any future complaints before placing blame on any particular employee. From that point on, my workplace environment became more respectful and positive, and I felt proud of myself for standing up for myself and making a positive change. However, a few months after this incident, there was another situation that threatened to derail the progress that had been made. A customer, who had been disgruntled with the store's return policy, took out her anger on me by complaining to my boss that I had been rude and unhelpful to her. My boss, who had previously been supportive of me, seemed to be taking the customer's side without hearing my perspective. I was angry and frustrated, feeling as if all of my hard work in improving the workplace culture was being undone, but I didn't give up. I decided to sit down with my boss and explain the situation from my point of view. I spoke calmly and respectfully, explaining what had happened and why I had acted the way I did. After hearing me out, my boss apologized and said he would take my side moving forward. From that point on, my boss began to value my opinions and insights more than before. I felt empowered and respected in my workplace, and I knew that my decision to dye my hair pink had ultimately led to a better work environment for everyone. Update. It's been several years since the hair incident, and I've since moved on from that job. But the experience taught me a valuable lesson, to always stand up for myself and not be afraid to make bold moves to prove my worth. I've taken that lesson with me throughout my career and have been successful in every job I've had since. And as for my hair, I've experimented with many different colors since then, but I always have a special place in my heart for the bold pink that helped me prove my point. I've also stayed in touch with some of my former colleagues, and I've heard that my boss at the fashion boutique has continued to prioritize fairness and respect in the workplace. It makes me happy to know that my actions had a lasting impact on the culture of the store, even after I left. Looking back on that time, I'm proud of the courage I showed in standing up for myself and making a change. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I doubted myself, but I knew that I couldn't continue to let others blame me for something that wasn't my fault. Since then, I've become more confident in my abilities and more vocal about my needs and expectations in both my personal and professional life. I've learned that sometimes making a bold move is necessary to get the respect and recognition we deserve. And who knows, maybe someday I'll dye my hair pink again, just for fun. But no matter what, I'll always remember that first time, and how it helped me prove a point and make a positive change in the world around me. The last one is an entitled people story. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was just 4 years old. It was a shock to my parents and me, but we learned to manage it over the years. I had to take insulin injections multiple times a day, and my parents had to monitor my blood sugar levels constantly. But as I grew up, I became more independent and learned to manage my condition on my own. When I was in middle school, I started using a continuous glucose monitor and an insulin pump. The pump was a lifesaver for me as it delivered insulin to my body automatically and helped me avoid the constant injections. But it also had a little tube that connected the pump to my body, which could be a bit noisy at times. I had an individualized education program, IEP, in place, which meant that all my teachers were informed about my condition and the accommodations I needed in the classroom. They were told that I might need to access my pump during class and that it might make some noise. But they were also told that I would do so discreetly and only when necessary. However, one of my teachers was not very understanding. She was known for her strict and unreasonable behavior, and she had a particular hatred for technology. She was constantly on the lookout for any student who might be using a device during her class, and she would take extreme measures to enforce her rules. One day she caught me fidgeting with my pump in class. It was making some noise, and she assumed that it was a device that I wasn't supposed to have. Without even asking me what it was, she walked up to me and snatched it out of my pocket. And before I could even protest, she cut the tube with a pair of scissors. I was shocked and scared. My pump was a lifesaver for me, and I depended on it to keep me alive. I tried to explain to the teacher that it was my insulin pump, but she refused to listen. She accused me of disobeying her rules and being disrespectful, and to add insult to injury, she made me call my mother to bring a replacement infusion set, which took hours. When my mother arrived, she was furious. She demanded to speak to the teacher and the principal, and she made it clear that she would not tolerate such behavior. The teacher tried to apologize, but my mother was not satisfied. She wanted the school to take strict action against the teacher and ensure that no student would face such discrimination again. In the end, the school authorities had to hold a meeting with us and apologize for the incident. They promised to provide more training to the teachers about accommodating students with disabilities. But my mother was not satisfied. She wanted the teacher to be fired and sued the school for endangering my life. It was a long and tiring process, but we eventually got justice. The teacher was fired and the school had to pay a hefty sum as compensation. And to make sure that such incidents never happen again, my mother worked with the school to develop a policy for accommodating students with disabilities. The policy was adopted by the school district, and it became a model for other schools in the state. Years later, I graduated from college and started my own business. I still use an insulin pump, but I have never faced such discrimination again. And I'm proud to say that my mother's advocacy work has helped many other students with disabilities get the accommodations they need in the classroom. However, the incident had a long-lasting impact on me. I became fearful of facing discrimination in other areas of my life, and I struggled with anxiety and depression. It was not until I went to therapy and learned to manage my mental health that I was able to move on from the incident. But then something unexpected happened. Years after the incident, I received a letter from the teacher who had cut my insulin pump tube. She apologized for her actions and expressed regret for the pain she had caused me and my family. She explained that she had been going through a difficult time in her personal life and that she had taken out her frustrations on me. At first, I was hesitant to accept her apology. I still felt angry and hurt by what she had done to me. But as I read her letter again, I realized that she was genuinely remorseful and that she had taken steps to educate herself about diabetes and other disabilities. She had attended workshops and seminars and had become an advocate for students with disabilities in her new school. I decided to meet with her and hear her out. We had a long and emotional conversation, and she apologized again for her actions. But this time I could see that she was sincere, and I could feel the weight of her remorse. We parted ways on good terms, and I felt a sense of closure and healing. In the years that followed, I became an advocate for students with disabilities myself. I volunteered at local schools and worked with organizations that advocated for disability rights. And I discovered that my experience had given me a unique perspective on the struggles of others. And then one day I received an invitation to speak at a conference on disability rights. I was nervous but excited to share my story and inspire others. And as I spoke about my experience, I realized that my story had the power to change hearts and minds. After the conference, a woman approached me and told me that she had been inspired by my story. She was a teacher herself, and she had never thought much about accommodating students with disabilities. But after hearing my story, she realized that she had a responsibility to do better. She thanked me for opening her eyes and promised to advocate for students with disabilities in her classroom. It was a powerful moment for me, and it reminded me that my experience had the power to make a difference. And as I continue to advocate for disability rights, I hope that my story will inspire others to do the same. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.